Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I wrote a book called The Love Story. It's basically by me and it's very useful. So I call it The Love Story because I used to have a love story also until it had to end earlier. Anyways, if you haven't seen my channel, go to the link in the description and watch and subscribe to my channel. If you're not subscribed, you'll be in big trouble. Okay, so we're starting from chapter 1 to chapter 2. This book chapters are very small, so it will be okay. We can read all 4 chapters if you want. The Love Story by Shikhar Srikanth. Dan was a kid with all A pluses. Many of his friends failed. It is the start of 8th grade and he is going to be an accelerated education. He never believed in dating or kissing. All Dan wanted was to be smart, but there was a distraction that Dan faced. But Dan's seat was a hot girl named Sophie. She was like Dan. She was smart and had all A pluses. Dan ignored her and studied. At the end of school, Sophie went on her bus. She looked out of her window and saw Caitlin, her first best friend. When Dan was on his bus, he saw his friend Salu. His name is Salvador, but Dan calls his name short. After Dan got home, he showed his mom his report card. His mom was so happy. He was going to Baltimore pick up his dad from the airport. His dad is the CEO of Sheila Enterprises. He was in India for 3 months. They came back home to watch the Baltimore Ravens game. Dan's brother Joe Kobe was a rookie QB for the Baltimore Ravens. His dream was to be in a Super Bowl. Sorry if I'm coughing real bad. Joe Kobe made the Ravens win against the Steelers 39-33. While Sophie was watching the Ravens game, she saw something strange. Dan's last name was same as Joe Kobe's. Sophie thought it was an illusion, but it was true. So it made Sophie think. She did not sleep at all last night, thinking about Dan and Joe Kobe. The next chapter, The Love Story, chapter 2 by Shikhar Srikanth. That's me. The next day, Sophie was nervous. Asking Dan a question about a football player was a stupid thing. Then, a poster of Dan's brother told the answer. It was lunchtime. Sophie came to Caitlin and asked, "Should we sit with Dan and Salu?" Caitlin said, "Sure." Then Sophie and Dan were they were talking. After lunch, a bully named Grayson beat up a nerd, Logan. Sophie went up to Grayson and slapped him on the face. It was period 2 math. Sophie and Dan were partners. They were the 2 acing students. The teacher, Ms. Popdar, leveled them an extra grade. Math and reading level 9th grade. Then Dan and Sophie realized that they were a good couple, but they did not want to date. When Dan went back home with Salu, he asked a stupid question. "Do you think me and Sophie are a good couple?" Salu laughed. He said back, You are a smart friend. You and Sophie are a good couple." On the blacktop of their elementary school, Dan and Salu were practicing for their basketball game this Saturday. There, Dan and Salu saw Sophie with her cheerleading team. Back home, Sophie was doing her homework. She was thinking, should she go to Dan's basketball game? So Sophie asked her mom if she could go to Dan's basketball game, and she went there, and so she cheered up Dan and Salu. But Dan and Salu lost the basketball game. Devastating. Okay, we're now in chapter 3. Just 2 more chapters to go. The Love Story, chapter 3 by Shikhar Srikanth. Dan went back home sad. He took a good night's sleep. On Sunday, he heard good news. Dan's brother, Joe Kobe, is the captain for the Ravens. Sophie also saw the news, and she was going to be at Dan's house to play for a while. After they were done playing, Dan played some football. When Sophie went back home, her annoying brother Carl broke her cheerleading gloves. got grounded for that. Sophie ordered a new pair of cheer gloves. When Dan was sleeping, he had a love dream of him and Sophie. They kissed for the first time. Dan woke up with a smile. When Dan went to school, his first person he wanted to meet was Salu. He told Salu his dream. Salu was laughing so hard that made his nose bleed so hard. That would pain so bad. Salu came from the nurse's office and said, "It's not your fault. She is a cool girlfriend for you, Dan." Dan went to period 6, reading and writing. There, Mr. Baston said, "Write any story to any of your friends." Dan wrote a love note to Sophie. He showed it to Salu. Salu agreed with it. When Dan was going to give the note to Sophie, Grayson interrupted Dan. And Grayson gave Sophie a rose. Now, usually, Sophie is very nice to people, but for Grayson, she was not happy with him. Sophie rejected Grayson and left the cafeteria. Sophie was crying because a memory of her was when Grayson tried to punch her once in kindergarten. That memory made her sad. Then Dan and Salu came cheering her up, and Dan gave her the note. She read it somewhere else. Caitlin saw a note she was holding, and they talked about it. Okay, last chapter. Things might get weird. I can do chapter 5 also. Just we gotta be patient. Okay. After Sophie read the letter, she felt so blushed. She did reject Grayson. She told Caitlin that Dan loves her. She was so blushed that her heart was pounding. She told Caitlin that I've never felt this way. After school, Sophie rushed to the bus and got home. She felt like her brother Carl. So Carl saw her and gave her advice about dating. Sophie imagined Dan next to her, and she imagined him going to dance with her. Sophie slept with a good smile. The next day, Sophie didn't see Dan at school. She asked Salu, "Where is Dan?" Salu said, he has a high fever. He's going to miss 2 days of school. Sophie missed Dan so much that she sat alone and did not talk to anyone. While Dan was sick, Jacoby went to see Dan. He asked Coach if he could take a break. Dan's dad gave him some meds. After Dan went back to school, he played with Sophie. Sophie then was writing a note to Dan. After school, Sophie shared her phone number to Dan. Then Jacoby and Dan were playing some football. Jacoby asked Dan, "Do you have a crush?" Dan said, "No." Jacoby is having a wedding with his girlfriend Zing. When Dan was sleeping, he asked Jacoby about dating. After his lecture, Dan texted Sophie, and Sophie texted back, "I love you, Dan." Anyways, guys, thank you for watching this video. This book will be filled with all love stories. And if you want to see more of my videos, go down to search up Shikhar Srikanth, and then you can see it again. And if you hear, and if this is for one of my school friends, if you hear your names in the book, do not worry, because this is just a story. Anyways, hope you guys have a good day. Peace out. Love you guys. See you later. Bye.